These racist jewelers try to arrest a young black kid, but he makes one phone call to his mom, which uncovers a very dark truth about this store. There was nothing suspicious about the boy that morning. He entered Sterling and Company just after 10 a.m., when the city was beginning to stir, but the sidewalks were still damp from an overnight rain. The store sat quietly on the corner of 5th and Broome, an elegant boutique of glass cases and velvet trays, gold-lettered signage, and watchful employees. The kind of place that didn't advertise sales or welcome foot traffic. It catered to a certain kind of customer, and he didn't look like one of them. 15 years old, hoodie, faded jeans, quiet steps. He walked like someone used to being underestimated. His name was Zaire. He moved carefully between the counters, eyes trained on the pieces but hands never straying too close. A black onyx bracelet caught his attention. Sleek, minimal, a design that didn't need to shout to be noticed. He tilted his head, studying it with a kind of reverence. Behind the counter, a saleswoman paused mid-swipe on her tablet. She watched him from the corner of her eye. Not curious, not helpful, just waiting for a reason. Zaire reached for a business card beside the display. It was tucked neatly between a small stack of branded brochures. His fingers grazed the card, and the saleswoman's voice cracked the silence like breaking glass. "Don't touch that." He blinked. "It's just a..." "Step back from the counter." Zaire did as she said, slow and careful, hands retreating into his hoodie pocket like a guilty plea. But there was nothing guilty in his stance, just stillness, a kind of practiced control that shouldn't belong to someone so young. From the back room, another figure emerged, broader, older, the kind of man whose presence filled space before his voice did. He wore a thick gold ring and a button-down shirt with rolled sleeves. He didn't ask what the problem was. He didn't look at the bracelet or the card or even Zaire. He looked at the saleswoman. She didn't hesitate. "I think he took something." Zaire flinched just slightly. "I didn't." The man's face was unreadable. "We've had a string of shoplifters lately," he said, loud enough for the security camera that wasn't recording. "Fast hands. Real fast." Zaire opened his mouth, then closed it. He reached into his hoodie, slow, deliberate, and pulled out nothing but a phone. He held it low, screen lit. He didn't start recording. He dialed. The man behind the counter was already signaling to someone off camera. "Security, lock the front door." The latch clicked. The store went silent. Outside, the city moved on. Cars rolled past. A couple laughed as they crossed the street. No one saw the boy inside the glass boutique, standing still while a world of assumptions closed in around him. He pressed the phone to his ear. It rang once. Then his mother picked up. "Ma," Zaire said, barely above a whisper. They locked the door. "Said I stole something." The voice on the other end stayed calm, too calm. "Where are you?" "Sterling and Company, on 5th. A pause. "I'm on my way. Don't move. Don't say anything unless you have to. You understand me?" "Yes, ma'am." The call ended. He slipped the phone into his back pocket and stood up a little straighter. The man, the store owner, Zaire assumed, was already back behind the counter, speaking in low tones to someone on a landline. Zaire couldn't hear the full conversation, but he caught phrases. Possible theft. Young male. No ID given. The saleswoman was now stationed by the exit, arms crossed tight over her chest. Every few seconds, she glanced at Zaire like she was daring him to breathe wrong. "You sure you didn't take anything?" she asked again, voice sharp. Zaire said nothing. She huffed. They always act innocent, every time. Every time, like he was a repeat offender in someone else's script. Zaire didn't move, didn't speak. He counted the seconds between the words being used against him. Each one dropped like a pebble into the silence, rippling with implication. Two more store employees appeared from the back, one of them carrying a key ring, the other holding a small clipboard. They didn't ask questions. They didn't look at Zaire. They moved like people who'd been through this before. "Call the cops," the owner said. "Let them sort it out." Zaire's stomach didn't twist. His eyes didn't drop. There was no flinch left in him, just a quiet steadiness, like he knew something no one else in the room did. When the clerk picked up the phone to dial 911, Zaire sat back down on the small bench beside the register. He placed his hands flat on his thighs. The call was short. "We've got a suspected shoplifter. Male, black, about 16. Won't show ID. No items in hand, but we believe he may have pocketed something. Yes, we're holding him." Zaire turned slightly, looking at the security camera above the door. Still unplugged. "We should search him," someone muttered, "before the cops get here." "We're not touching him," the owner said. "Not until we've got backup." They all stood in a half circle now, a crooked wall of eyes and accusation. Zaire didn't break. He sat still and quiet, head held high. The silence inside the store grew heavier by the minute. The ticking of a wall clock filled the space like footsteps in a hallway. Every glance thrown at Zaire was laced with fear, pretending to be certainty. They didn't know what he might do, so they imagined the worst. The saleswoman paced by the window, biting her thumbnail. "He hasn't said anything. That's suspicious, right?" The clipboard employee muttered something about checking inventory. The other whispered about calling their regional manager. Zaire heard everything, even the things they didn't say aloud. They didn't see a boy. They saw a risk. Every time he blinked, he remembered his mother's voice. Don't give them anything. Not fear, not anger, not a scene they could twist. He watched the minutes crawl across the digital display above the register. 3 minutes, then 5, then 10. He wondered if the police would come quickly or if they'd delay the response the way they sometimes did in neighborhoods that didn't tip well. He wondered if they'd listen or just escalate. He wondered what version of himself they'd already been told to expect. He wasn't scared, but he was alert. Outside, a few passers-by peeked in through the glass. Some looked confused. One knocked lightly before being waved away. Zaire wanted to disappear, not to run, but to not have to be here, performing patience under scrutiny. "I bet he's got it in his hoodie," the clerk said. "They always hide it in the front pocket." Zaire shifted slightly, just enough to let his arms rest by his sides. His face was unreadable. The door handle jiggled. Someone tried to open it. "Closed for a private event," the owner shouted. Then he looked back at Zaire. "You got anything to say before this gets worse for you?" Zaire looked him in the eyes. "You sure you want to finish that sentence?" It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Not from a boy. From someone who knew the cavalry was coming. Because Zaire didn't just believe his mom would come. He knew what she was capable of. He'd seen what happened when people mistook her composure for passivity. She didn't yell. She didn't swing. She showed up. With records, with names, with authority so precise it sliced the arrogance right off people's tongues. He didn't have to raise his voice, because she would raise the stakes, and she never arrived empty-handed. Agent Amira Langston was in the middle of reviewing a forensic audit when her phone rang. She didn't flinch. She never did. Her job required the kind of attention that left no room for surprise. But when she saw her son's name flash on the screen, she didn't hesitate. One ring. Then she answered. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. "Ma, they locked the door. Said I stole something." She didn't need context. She knew his tone. Zaire didn't panic. Not even when he should have. That was the problem. He'd learned too young how to bury fear. "Where are you?" "Sterling and Company, on 5th. A long pause. "I'm on my way. Don't move. Don't say anything unless you have to. You understand me?" "Yes, ma'am." She ended the call, closed the audit file, reached into her drawer and retrieved her badge. Not the wallet one, the one in the case with the black leather backing and the gold trim that screamed federal jurisdiction. FBI, Chief of Financial Crimes. It wasn't just a title, it was leverage, and she was about to apply pressure. She moved through the bureau building with precision. She didn't yell, didn't gather a team. She made one call. "This is Langston. Meet me downstairs. I need a quiet entry at Sterling and Company. Bring case file 17A. We're going in soft." The agent on the other end didn't ask questions. No sirens, no lights, just a black SUV and the slow building tension of someone very powerful approaching with purpose. As they drove, Langston reviewed what she already knew. Sterling and Company had been flagged 6 months ago in a routine SAR suspicious activity report linked to a web of cash-heavy businesses laundering through false invoices. It hadn't escalated yet. No arrests, no raids, just quiet observation. But that changed today, because today they made it personal. "How far are we?" she asked. "6 blocks out," the driver said. "Slow approach, no noise, we walk in like customers. Once I engage, you lock it down." The agent nodded. "Copy that." She looked out the window as they passed storefronts and cafes, her mind racing but her pulse steady. She had built her entire career on knowing when to strike, when to push, and when to wait. But this wasn't just strategy. This was motherhood in armor. Back at the store, Zaire was still sitting on the bench near the register, a statue in a room full of cracking paint. The saleswoman had stopped pacing. Now she stood silently, checking her phone every 30 seconds, as if expecting backup, or maybe just permission to feel less guilty. The store owner kept checking the time, his confidence starting to curdle into anxiety. "Where are they?" he muttered, mostly to himself. "They said they'd dispatch someone right away," the clerk offered. Zaire didn't say a word. His mother had told him not to, and when his mother gave instructions, he followed them. Not because he was afraid, but because he respected the storm she could summon. The SUV pulled up 1 block away. Langston stepped out first. She didn't slam the door. She didn't march. She walked like someone who knew the floor plan. Because she did. The store's layout had been mapped and diagrammed in the Bureau's digital archive. Every display, every exit, every blind spot. She approached the storefront with the ease of a window shopper and paused for just a beat before opening the door. Inside, the air shifted. Everyone looked up. "Store's closed," the owner said reflexively. Langston didn't stop. "No, it's not." Her voice was calm, authoritative, the kind of voice people obey even before they know why. She stepped fully inside, flashing her badge with a flick of the wrist. Not aggressively, just enough for it to land like a gavel. "Amira Langston, Federal Bureau of Investigation. This young man is my son. I'm going to ask once. Why was he detained without evidence?" The owner blinked. I didn't know he was." "You didn't know who he was, and that's the problem. Now explain why you locked the door and called in a theft report." The clerk stammered. We thought he took something. We didn't see it, but he looked suspicious." Langston raised an eyebrow. "Looked suspicious." She turned to the security camera above the counter. "Still offline? That's convenient." Behind her, her agent stepped in and silently took position by the door, nodding once. Lockdown initiated. "We didn't mean any harm," the saleswoman offered. He just walked in," Langston said, "and your response was to treat him like a threat." The room went still. Zaire finally stood. He didn't say a word, just looked at his mother, steady and tall. She gave him the smallest nod. The agent near the door cleared his throat and held up a slim black folder. "Ma'am, case file 17A, financial irregularities for Sterling and Company, flagged as of March. False invoices, front accounts, suspicious wire activity." Langston took it and laid it flat on the counter. "While you were profiling my son," she said, "we've been profiling your store." The owner went pale. "You're not here for a theft report, are you?" he said. Langston's smile was cold. "Oh, we're here for a theft, just not the kind you tried to fake." She stepped closer, her voice low but slicing. "You detained my son, called the police, lied on a report, and now you're standing on a minefield of criminal exposure. So let me make this simple. You're not in control anymore." Outside, pedestrians walked by, oblivious to the reckoning happening inside. But inside, the balance had shifted. Zaire looked at the people who had accused him. None of them met his eyes. Because now, the most dangerous person in the room wasn't the boy they thought they had cornered. It was his mother. And she never showed up empty-handed. No one moved. Agent Amira Langston stood at the center of the room like a dropped anchor, steady and immovable. Her agent had sealed the door. The store was no longer a boutique. It was now a scene. The owner shifted behind the counter, lips twitching like he wanted to explain, to backpedal, to plead his way out of a narrative he no longer controlled. The weight of Langston's badge was still hanging in the air. Zaire stood at her side, quiet, watchful. The same boy they'd treated like a suspect 10 minutes ago now stood like a witness. The silence expanded, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator unit in the back room and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights above. The saleswoman had backed herself into a corner, still clutching her tablet like it could shield her from consequence. Her confidence had deflated into silence, and her once firm stare darted nervously across the room. Langston opened the case file slowly, flipping through pages with deliberate calm. Transaction records, shell invoices, surveillance notes. Every turn of the page made the room feel smaller. "Let me explain," the owner finally blurted, voice cracking. "We didn't mean to accuse anyone. It was a misunderstanding." Langston didn't look up. A misunderstanding is forgetting a name. Locking a minor in your store and filing a false report? That's policy. He swallowed hard. It looked suspicious. He looked— "Stop, right there," she said, her voice razor sharp. The agent by the door stepped forward. "Ma'am, do you want us to begin collecting physical evidence?" "Not yet," Langston replied. "They still think this is salvageable." Zaire didn't speak, but his shoulders were square now. He had seen his mother in courtrooms and boardrooms. He had watched her dismantle multi-million-dollar crime syndicates without breaking stride. But seeing her here, standing for him, changed something inside him. It wasn't just power, it was precision, controlled fire. Langston closed the folder. "You want to know what's happening next? I'll tell you. You're being flagged for obstruction. You lied in a police report. You falsely detained a minor. And we now have probable cause to seize and audit every digital system in this building." Wait, the owner stammered. "Don't you need a warrant for that?" "Oh, I brought one." She nodded to her agent, who produced a sealed envelope and laid it on the counter. "Signed this morning. You've been under investigation for 6 months. The only reason we haven't shut you down yet is because we were watching to see who else came through your doors." "And now," Langston's expression didn't change, "now you've just fast-tracked the whole thing." The store manager opened his mouth to argue, but he was interrupted by a sharp buzz from the agent's earpiece. He turned slightly, nodded once, and looked to Langston. "Backup's here. Digital forensics team, 2 minutes out." "Let them in," Langston said. She turned to Zaire, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Go stand by the door. I want you to see this. I want you to remember that you did nothing wrong." He nodded and stepped back, his posture still calm but now tinged with vindication. The door opened. 3 more agents entered, carrying hard drives, forensic imaging equipment, and portable scanners. They didn't make eye contact with the employees. They went straight to the registers, the security terminal, the storage office. The boutique transformed before their eyes, from luxury showroom to crime scene. The clerk with the clipboard tried to disappear behind a shelf, but an agent called her back. "We need access to all employee terminals." I don't know the password," she stuttered. "You'll still give us your badge key." Langston remained at the center, watching it all unfold with the kind of silent satisfaction that came not from vengeance, but from clarity. Her son had been profiled, accused, and locked inside this very space. And now that space was being picked apart, every digital inch examined, every assumption flipped on its head. Zaire leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. Not smug, just grounded. The saleswoman tried to explain again. "We've had thefts, real ones, and he didn't look like our usual customer." Langston's eyes narrowed. "And what does your usual customer look like?" Silence. Outside, a small crowd had started to gather. Someone had seen the agents enter. A phone was up, filming through the glass. Langston didn't care. She wasn't there for show, but sometimes justice needed an audience. The owner reached forward as if to make one last appeal. "Please, we're a family business. This will ruin us." Langston stepped closer. "You ruined yourself the moment you decided that my son didn't belong here. You didn't just make a bad call, you revealed your foundation." He blinked, confused. "What foundation?" "The one built on fear, on profiling, on assuming power belongs to a certain kind of person. Today, that lie breaks." For a beat, no one moved. Then Langston stepped back and looked at her watch. "This operation is now officially escalated. You'll be receiving subpoenas for your financial records, supplier contracts, and security logs. If you withhold anything, we'll escalate to obstruction and conspiracy. Zaire watched the panic settle in their eyes. It was quiet, heavy, earned. The boy they had locked in, the woman they had underestimated, and now the wait was over. What came next wasn't judgment, it was reckoning. The forensics team was already working when the next wave of silence hit the room. One of the agents leaned over the central POS system, pulling transaction logs from the past 6 months. Another scanned the locked office in the back with a handheld device. Hidden drives, concealed routers. Whatever Sterling and Company had buried under the illusion of luxury, it was starting to bleed to the surface. Zaire stood still near the entrance, arms folded. He didn't fidget. He didn't interrupt. He simply watched. There was a quiet command in him now. Not arrogance, but awareness. His mother's presence had transformed the store. Where once there had been suspicion and control, there was now consequence and accountability. And Zaire wasn't just a boy anymore. He was witness. Agent Langston flipped open her badge case again, pressing it onto the counter, not to show authority, but to make it impossible to ignore. "You asked for identification," she said calmly, "but only from my son. You questioned his presence, his purpose, his right to exist in your space. So now, let me properly introduce myself." The saleswoman swallowed hard. The store manager's eyes flicked to the exit, calculating a route he couldn't take. "Special Agent Amira Langston, Financial Crimes Division, FBI. I lead federal investigations into money laundering, asset manipulation, and commercial fraud. And you, Sterling and Company, just made my job significantly easier." One of the field agents stepped forward. "Ma'am, we've confirmed 2 encrypted servers in the back office. Routing protocols suggest offshore transactions, likely masked through dummy vendors." Langston didn't blink. "Secure them. Make sure chain of custody is tight. This place will try to wriggle loose with paperwork, so we build a wall they can't scale." The clerk finally broke her silence. "Please, we didn't know. He looked suspicious." Langston's eyes narrowed. "That's what you keep saying. But what you mean is, he looked unfamiliar, like he didn't belong here, like you assumed he wasn't a customer, just a problem." The owner stepped forward, hands slightly raised in a weak display of diplomacy. "Ms. Langston, this doesn't have to go public. We can talk. Settle this quietly." Langston's laugh was soft, dangerous. "You already made it public. You locked the door. You called the police. You filed a false report. Everything after that became my jurisdiction." Outside, the crowd had grown. Someone in a tracksuit leaned against a lamppost, recording everything. Another person whispered, "That's the FBI, right?" Langston turned to Zaire. "You ready to go?" He nodded. She looked to her team. "This operation continues until I say otherwise. Full pull. I want records of every transaction, every suspicious invoice, every single internal memo about cash flow for the last 12 months. "Yes, ma'am." She turned to the owner one last time. "You tried to reduce my son to a profile, to a threat. But let me tell you what you actually did. You opened the door to your own secrets. You turned a regular audit into a full-scale investigation. And now you get to answer for it." The room was ice. She motioned for Zaire, and they walked toward the exit together. Before leaving, she paused just inside the glass doorway and looked back. "Next time you want to assume who someone is," she said, "make sure you're not doing it in front of someone who outranks your entire world." They stepped outside, and for the first time in an hour, Zaire exhaled. The city felt different, colder but clearer. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Now I am." They didn't speak for a block. Behind them, Sterling and Company was being dismantled, piece by piece, lie by lie. He looked up at her. "You think they'll go to jail?" Langston gave a small shrug. "Maybe. Probably. Doesn't matter. The system they built is coming down either way." Zaire nodded. He understood more than he said. That sometimes the loudest statement you could make was showing up in silence, with the weight of truth behind you. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out the business card he'd picked up. The one they said he tried to steal. He handed it to his mother. Evidence, he said. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Damn right it is. By the time Agent Langston and Zaire had cleared the block, the investigation was no longer a quiet sting. The Bureau's digital forensics team had turned Sterling and Company inside out. Agents moved with clinical efficiency, securing hard drives, cloning servers, photographing inventory, and cross-referencing purchase orders against financial logs. What had started as a boutique showroom now resembled a digital crime lab. One agent leaned over a laptop connected to the store's network, frowning at lines of code. They've been running spoofed invoices through 3 dummy vendors. Paper trail leads to offshore accounts in Luxembourg, Belize, and Singapore. Another opened a back cabinet and revealed an entire drawer of unregistered SIM cards, prepaid debit cards, and stacks of forged customer receipts. They've been laundering cash directly through retail purchases, he said. Classic shell game. Luxury goods, high markup, low scrutiny. The owner stood in the corner, pale and silent. The saleswoman had stopped making excuses. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor. The agent in charge took photos with a quiet steadiness, marking each one with time-stamped notes. Label the drawer as active concealment, he said. This is no longer just fraud. It's organized financial crime. Meanwhile, Agent Langston stood a block away under a coffee shop awning, briefing a district coordinator over the phone. She spoke calmly but with weight. Yes, we're escalating the case. Yes, it's confirmed. Multiple financial fronts, false vendor streams, security manipulation. Sterling and Company is the centerpiece of a wider laundering ring. She paused. And yes, they falsely detained a minor during the operation. My son. The silence on the other end was heavy. That part won't be in the report, Langston continued, because it doesn't need to be. The report is what they did to everyone who didn't look like their definition of a customer. She ended the call, took a long breath. Inside the shop, the walls were closing in. The agent at the counter called out, "We've accessed archived footage from the backroom cameras. Surveillance doesn't just show laundering. It shows private meetings, people moving cash. We've got timestamps." Another added, "Confirmed, cash safe in the floor under display case 3. It's not listed on the insurance logs." Everything they'd hidden was now a neon sign, and it had all started with a quiet boy looking at a bracelet. In a quiet conference room 3 floors above the shop, a secondary FBI team had already begun prepping warrants for the partner stores linked to Sterling and Company. 10 locations on the ledger so far, said one analyst. All luxury or semi-luxury, jewelry, art, boutique clothing, even a wine shop. Langston reviewed the board, her arms folded. They spread just wide enough to look legitimate. Not so big they'd get noticed by the feds unless we were already watching. Smart, arrogant. She circled 2 addresses. These 2 are next. We sweep their digital records, then go dark. No headlines. We don't give them time to scatter. A junior agent leaned in. And the original shop? Langston didn't hesitate. We let them rot in their own narrative. They thought they were untouchable. They thought bias would protect them. Now they'll see what truth feels like. Back at Sterling and Company, the inventory was being tagged and boxed. Every item, from diamond earrings to cheap brooches, was now evidence. A reporter had appeared outside, snapping photos through the window. Langston noticed but didn't stop him. Some stories deserved to break. That evening, Zaire sat in his mother's office, feet tucked under the guest chair, watching her work. She was typing notes into a case file, her eyes locked on the screen. He didn't interrupt. After a while, she spoke without looking up. "You handled yourself well today." Zaire shrugged. "You told me not to move." "That's not what I mean." She turned to him. "You didn't give them a show. You didn't let them define you. That takes strength. Most adults I know don't have that." Zaire leaned back in the chair. "Are they going to jail?" Langston raised an eyebrow. "You're obsessed with that part." "I just think it matters that people see it." She nodded. "Maybe they do. But the system isn't just about who goes to jail. It's about who gets seen, about who finally gets asked the right questions." He thought about that. "They never even asked me my name. Number, they asked if you were a problem. That's all they needed to know, in their eyes. Langston closed her laptop. But now we ask the questions. Zaire stood. He walked over to the large caseboard on the wall, a spread of photos, ledgers, connecting lines. I want to help, he said. Langston smiled. You already did. She handed him a red marker. Circle the address you think they'll run from next. Zaire looked over the list, paused. He made his mark. And for the first time, it wasn't just a red circle. It was agency. By morning, the clip had reached 20,000 views. It was shaky footage, filmed through the storefront glass by someone walking their dog. It captured Zaire sitting calmly, Agent Langston standing in full authority, and a swarm of federal agents working silently behind her. The caption read, "They locked in the wrong kid. She unlocked the whole thing." It was shared in private group chats, reposted on local news blogs, and finally picked up by a community activist account with a following that stretched into the hundreds of thousands. The reactions came fast. The son of an FBI chief being profiled in plain sight. You can't write this. Systemic racism doesn't need a headline. It needs receipts. She brought the whole damn ledger. This woman is the reason we fight back with our heads up. At the Langston home, Zaire sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the posts. His face was unreadable. Not embarrassed, not excited, just still. Across the room, his mother was on a conference call, coordinating the next phase of the Sterling and Company crackdown. Her voice remained even, clear. The agents on the line spoke with quick, focused tones. Zaire caught only fragments. 2 more stores flipped. Wire trail matches the pattern. Coordinating with financial intelligence. He set the phone down and watched the steam rise off his untouched tea. A part of him had imagined this would feel victorious, like something cinematic, but it didn't. It felt quiet, like something heavy had shifted and couldn't be pushed back. His mother ended the call and looked over. You okay? He nodded. It's just a lot. She joined him at the table. It is, and it's not over. Zaire leaned forward. Everyone's talking like it's a win, but it doesn't feel like I won. It just feels like I got seen. Langston's gaze didn't waver. That's the first step. You know what most kids never get? A chance to be seen as they are, not as they're feared. You didn't win a contest. You survived a trap. He looked down. Yeah. She reached over and touched his hand. But now you get to help build the alternative. At Sterling and Company, the fallout was accelerating. Federal seals had been placed across the storefront. A formal notice was posted. This property is under investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Employees had been dismissed for the duration of the probe. Internal emails leaked. The store's owner had hired a lawyer before noon. But what hurt the most was the whisper network. Whispers in nearby boutiques. Whispers from clients asking if their names were now part of an audit trail. Other businesses started purging records, scrubbing data, calling their own attorneys. The network was unraveling, and at its center was a 15-year-old boy and the mother who'd walked through the front door like a verdict. Zaire returned to school the next day. Some classmates stared, some whispered. One even asked for a selfie, but most just avoided him until lunch. That's when Marissa, the quiet girl from his AP Civics class, sat beside him without asking. I saw the video, she said. I didn't know your mom was, her. Zaire shrugged. Neither did they. Good, they shouldn't have to know. You were just shopping. That should have been enough. He looked at her. You ever get followed in a store? She nodded. Twice, once at a bookstore. They didn't need to say more. The table stayed quiet, but it didn't feel awkward. It felt understood. That weekend, Zaire joined Langston at the Bureau's data lab. The whiteboards were full, maps, strings, digital breadcrumbs. She handed him a stylus. You still want to help? He nodded. Then map the timeline. Start with the first Sterling Shell Company. Build the branches. Zaire stepped up to the smart wall and began connecting dots. Each name led to another. Each line made the picture clearer. And by the time he stepped back, something clicked. This one, he said, pointing to a boutique floral importer listed in fine print. It doesn't match the transaction pattern. It spikes during weekends. That's laundering behavior. Langston smiled. You've got the instincts. Zaire didn't smile back. Number, I've just learned how to spot what people try to hide. And with that, he added another name to the board. A month later, the network had collapsed. 9 businesses raided, 4 indictments pending, 2 high-ranking money handlers awaiting extradition. The case was labeled a success internally, but Langston didn't frame it as such. In her final memo, she wrote, "The investigation began with numbers. It ended with a child, one that a system tried to erase. This wasn't just a financial case. It was a case of perception, of default mistrust, and of how easily justice can miss the mark when it's pointed at the wrong face." The memo wasn't for the public, but Zaire read it, and for the first time, he felt a kind of peace. Back in the city, the now vacant Sterling and Company storefront had been leased to a community arts nonprofit. They kept the original windows but added a mural inside, a painting of a young boy in a hoodie standing beside a woman holding a badge. No names, no headlines, just presence. Zaire passed it one evening, hands in his pockets, and paused to stare through the glass. Someone walked by and stopped. "Is that you?" He didn't answer. He just smiled and kept walking. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is continue forward.